If you want Colts talk all year long, you're in the right place.
Fires upfield into the end zone. It is caught. Jelani Woods, touchdown. He's going to fire upfield. It's broken up. Tipped and intercepted by the Colts.
This is the official Colts Podcast, giving you an updated look at what's new with the Horseshoes.
Colts have it. Interception. 2 seconds left, and the Colts are going to win.
In the Indiana Union Construction Industry radio studio, let's get the podcast started.
Welcome into the official Colts Podcast. I'm Jeffrey Gorman. JJ Stankevitz is here. Larra, Overton is here week in and week out, bringing you the best coverage. We were just talking about this before. It's like if there is not a low point, but like the lowest part of the basement of an NFL season, this would be kind of the week that it is, because we're 1 week out of the Super Bowl and we're 1 week in front of the Combine.
It's kind of like NFL purgatory.
Yeah.
It's like you're just waiting for the next level of things,
Yes,
right? Like
yes.
you're in between major events.
And so many questions that are
lull.
coming up, but I want to start off of the football field for a minute. What happens, I'm going to start with JJ Stankevitz because I can't wait till your topic comes up, hello. What starts in 36 days? JJ.
The MLB season.
Okay, and with that being said, two-part question, need two answers. A, who wins the most valuable player this year? This is way pre-season. And who is taking home the hardware?
I mean,
the MVP and the World Series champion.
How can you probably can't go against the Dodgers.
Right. I mean, Ohtani just hit his first swing as a Dodger in BP. He hit one out of the park.
Took one out, took one deep. They got that Yamamoto guy. So, the Dodgers is an easy call, but let's have a little fun here. Have a kind of an off-the-wall call. I want to see the Seattle Mariners win it.
Seattle.
I want to see Julio Rodriguez ascend to some
Good
superstardom.
Good player.
Real good player. And MVP, how about Julio Rodriguez?
Oh, nice. Okay.
And by the way, I just want everyone to know that I didn't know what direction you were going with this.
Of course.
When you said 36 days, I'm like, yep, that's MLB opening
day.
day.
You're a baseball nerd.
I am,
Are you playing fantasy baseball?
I do.
Of course. How many leagues?
One league,
Okay.
but it's a league I've been in for a while with all my college buddies. We kind of, play for fun, bragging rights, all that.
Life is good when baseball's around because that means the warmer weather coming.
Yeah.
Which transitions me. Okay, so MVP, we're going with
Julio Rodriguez
and the Dodgers, all right?
Yeah.
Hello, ma'am. What happens in 157 days?
Is it the Indy 500?
Close. No, not really. No, it's towards the end, May, June, July. In 157 days, right around the start, that you and this whole group and Kevin Connors behind the camera will be going to.
Training camp.
Yes, but a couple of days before that, that's actually 161 days up by my math, 157 days till, and I love this time of year, and I want to talk to you about it.
I don't know.
Is it a track event?
The Olympics start in
yes, it
Paris.
is.
Sorry.
And so, don't be sorry.
I was like, I'm thinking like pure. I was thinking hyper local.
Yes.
So I was like, okay, probably, I don't know, if maybe 500 or something.
You're right on it, though, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
You're right on.
Gosh.
So the Olympics, so with that being said.
Speaking of the U.S. Indoor Track and Field Championships, were just last week in Albuquerque.
Okay.
They will have not only the Olympic Games, of course, outdoors, there will be a World Indoor Championships as well in just a few weeks coming up.
Who are you covering every year when you go off? Is it Oregon or something? You went out and covered track and field events?
Yeah, so I went out in consecutive years. So did not do last year, did the previous 2 years because University of Oregon, Eugene, they have an incredible facility, kind of the mecca of track and field in the United States with all of the storied tradition and history that there is. But they hosted the World Championships and they hosted the Olympic trials. So I did the Olympic trials. That was in 2021 because it was delayed, with the pandemic, and then the World Championships.
Wow.
In 2022.
So you're excited about it, right?
Oh, yeah, very
Track
much.
and field all across the board, men's and women's. How about you on this side? What's the Olympics that you're like, yeah, I'm in?
Swimming.
Nice.
It's the only time I watch swimming, but man, it is like, so when I was in college, 2008 was the year that Michael Phelps had the, he's like, doing that flex in front of the, he's sitting in the pool and all that. And that was like the coolest thing to watch that in Beijing, where you'd wake up at 8 o'clock in the morning and get jacked up watching swimming. So because of that, now it's like every 4 years, I'm so excited. Give me Rowdy Gaines on my TV, getting excited about swimming.
Quick name drop. I got to work with Rowdy a couple of years ago. I did some NCAA swimming for ESPN. One of not only the nicest possible human beings on the planet, but so knowledgeable and like the way, I mean, I would say in terms of like, obviously there are analysts in other sports that get a lot more acclaim just because it's a higher profile sport. One of hands down the best analysts because of the insight and the knowledge that he gives, but in a very relatable way. He's absolutely incredible. It was so much fun.
And I mean, I feel like I also, like, every 4 years, I'm a swimming expert.
Yeah.
Of like, oh, they had a really bad turn. Oh, that push-off needed to be better. You got to stay underwater longer. And then the next 365 days for the next 4 years, I'm like,
Well, 157 days till that kicks off. I'm hearing Sha'Carri Richardson is up for Sha'Carri Richardson.
She's a phenom, yeah.
The US, and also a Noah Lyles, who's a speed merchant.
Yeah, Noah just won the 60 indoors, which is crazy because Noah was, a longer sprinter and has dropped down in distance because everybody wants to be known as the fastest man in the world. Yeah. So, guys who had previously run the 200s and the 400s, they're now all dropping out. Fred Curley is one of those guys. So now you have these guys who were longer sprinters dropping down in distance, and it's been phenomenal to see the range of some of these athletes. They're absolutely incredible. Yeah, Noah,
I can't wait. And the funny thing is, we're up at camp up at Westfield.
Yeah.
The Olympics are on, so keep that in mind. You're going to have to weigh and juggle what's going on in Paris, maybe.
Well,
while the scrum's going on with head coach Shane Steichen, we're getting a 100-meter final or something.
But the prime time for stuff in Paris will be taking place like mid-afternoon.
Right.
So the big events might be middle of the afternoon. So let's get some morning practices in.
There you go.
Up at Grand Park.
Hey,
which is what we did last year.
Yeah, right.
It was a lot early. Yeah.
You didn't think you were going to get Olympic talk and baseball talk here on the Official Colts Podcast, but you did. I want to bring it back to football. Here's the deal. Franchise tag window opens today, runs through March the 5th, and a week from today, we're going to be taping at the Indiana Convention Center down at the NFL Combine.
I can't believe it.
A lot of NFL coming
today.
at you. Colts.com has the latest. Don't forget to follow these two on Twitter X at JJ Stankevitz, at Larra Overton. Okay, here we go. The unofficial kickoff for of the offseason for all 32 teams at Combine going to be right in our backyard. A month from now, the first wave of free agency will have come and gone. And 2 months from now, the NFL draft will be gearing up. So I have Q&A time for you two today. A lot of questions. I need answers out of you guys. I'm going to start off with the first thing. You guys go. By the way, last week, good interview you had with Trevor Sikkema, giving down the layoff of the NFL offseason landscape. But today we're going to run through those, like, in my eyes, the most important questions, but only for this time of year. Hopefully that makes sense.
The stuff that we'll find answers to within the next 2.5 months.
It's pretty simple. With that tag opening up today, and Michael Pittman, kind of a two-parter, the Colts needing to build around a rookie contract and a phenomenal athlete in Anthony Richardson. When we talk about building around, are we talking about bringing back your own Michael Pittman? This is now the time with the franchise tag there. Are you talking about other assets around him as well? JJ, you first.
So let's start with Pittman because we talked about the tag. So today, Tuesday, February 20th through 4 p.m. on March 5th, you can place the franchise or the transition tag on players who are scheduled to become unrestricted free agents like Michael Pittman Jr. I have a whole explainer up on Colts.com because this is not a simple, you throw the tag on him and you're good. There are different tags, different kinds of franchise tags. Then there's the transition tag. It's a complicated thing to go through that. But I think ultimately the question becomes, is Michael Pittman Jr. back on this team? And if he is, then it's how is he back on this team? Is he back on a tag? Is he back on an extension? Is he back on a tag that then becomes an extension? There's a lot that's going to go into it, but that feeds into how do you build around Anthony Richardson? And like you mentioned, Jeffrey, you have a quarterback on a rookie contract, which allows you more flexibility. That's something Chris Ballard said in January, that you have more flexibility in years past than you've had in years past because you've had veteran quarterback contracts, which cost you quite a bit of cap. Now you have a quarterback who doesn't cost you pretty much anything comparatively in cap. So how does that look in terms of building around Richardson? It starts with Pittman, and then it goes to tight ends, other wide receivers, complementing him with running backs, backup quarterback, which we'll get into. But Larra, I guess when you look at the collection of weapons that are already here with this team, where do the Colts have strengths? I think that's kind of where you need to start identifying where this is going to go.
Going back, though, to your point on the tag, the other thing is it's complicated with the tag. It's not a long-term solution. And one of the things you run the risk of with the franchise tag is you kind of look what Saquon Barkley and the Giants went through last year. And he, didn't come in, I believe, did not do the voluntary workouts, came in later, all of that. So the thing that you kind of jeopardize if you go that route is, that's not necessarily going to be an ideal solution really all around. So do you, to some degree, run the risk of Michael Pittman not being involved in the voluntary workouts, only doing maybe the veteran mini camp portion, which is certainly going to stifle any development with Anthony Richardson if you are limiting or if the time with those guys during the offseason does become limited, right? Those are kind of some of the, I would say, politics of sorts that are involved that complicate the use of the franchise tag, just based on what we have seen with other high-profile, very lucrative deals with other teams.
Just to play quick devil's advocate on that, because this is an interesting thing. Wasn't Pittman, didn't he not participate much in workouts last year?
Because he was injured.
Same with Josh Downs, who was injured. So those are definitely important, and they're you can't. I don't want to underestimate and undersell the importance of them, but you can develop that chemistry as that shouldn't be a deterrent necessarily in making this decision.
You mentioned something about Barkley was on the tag, then got a deal done.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So my question for us is does Chris Ballard in the front office look at that as, hey, Michael, we're going to get something done? When I'm talking about Pittman Jr., we're going to get something done, but let's get you franchise tag, and we'll work on that extension. But does that bring him into the OTAs? Or if that tag is still out there, he's saying, hey, do what you got to do. I'm not going on the field until I get there. I'm talking about, you mentioned a good point on that, saying not showing up for offseason work. And this is one of the key leaders of this team, which could hamper.
I think the question there becomes, does he sign the tag before OTAs? Because when you get the tag placed on you, and then it doesn't convert to a 1-year contract that's fully guaranteed until you sign the tender. So if you try to work out an extension, it doesn't happen, he signs the tender, you say, we're still going to work out something with you, then he probably would be participating. But if he hasn't signed the tender by the start of the voluntary OTAs, all the offseason program stuff that begins, I believe, mid-April, then you might not see Michael Pittman Jr. here. That's by the way, that's fairly typical for players who are on the tag. To not show
right.
if they haven't worked on an extension yet. But we'll see. I mean, there's no guarantee here that the Colts are going to place anything on Michael Pittman Jr. because you can work it out and you can, okay, hey, maybe we're close. Let's not put the tag on him. Or maybe we aren't close, but maybe you should
not put the tag on him. Well, JJ, we open up that thing where you got people out on the West Coast that have $1 million bills in their hands. They're going this, saying, "Hey, Michael, come on."
But what if you're not close? This is what the Ravens did with Lamar Jackson last year. It's a different position, not necessarily the same, but they did put the franchise tag on him. But they said, go out and explore your market and figure out what's out there. And then he came back and he signed an extension. So sometimes when you do this, and you probably wouldn't do that with a franchise tag on a wide receiver, because there aren't going to be teams that are going to give up 2 first-round picks.
Right.
That's pretty rare. That hasn't happened since 2000, by the way, with Joey Galloway going from the Seahawks to the Cowboys.
Jeez,
but then that's what almost the transition tag is for. I covered the Bears. They did this with Kyle Fuller, where he was coming off a really good year in 2017. They didn't want to put the franchise tag on him because that would have put him in a tier of salary up there with, at that point, Stephon Gilmore, who was at top of the market cornerback money. So they used the transition tag. Kyle Fuller then signed an offer sheet with the Green Bay Packers that the Bears matched.
Gotcha.
The transition tag allows you to match an offer sheet. If you don't, you lose the guy with no compensation. But it's essentially a tool. If you aren't close with that player on a contract, you could put the transition tag on him and say, you go find out what your market is, and then we'll match it.
Want a good explanation? Go to Colts.com. Read this man's article on it. Larra, we talk about this fella a lot over the past 6 months and talked about the impact that he made in this building coming when Anthony Richardson wasn't available to come here and run OTAs. I'm talking about Gardner Minshew. Let's switch over right now. Are we not in the market for a backup quarterback? And And Wang on this side, everything great that he did this year. Take us a couple of incompleted passes away from a playoff berth,
Right.
and the job that he did. Always trying to get better, though. These GMs talk about it a lot. Do they have their guy in Gardner Minshew, or are they looking around the league?
I'm not sure that backup quarterbacks have been more valuable than they are currently coming out of last season, when you saw the number of different teams that were forced into situations of starting backup quarterbacks or even their third string quarterbacks at multiple points over the course of the season. I think Gardner certainly proved his value. It wouldn't surprise me if he explores, what is out there. If there's an opportunity for him to start somewhere, that's obviously what he wants. But there's a lot of intrigue for him to come back here as well. His rapport with Shane, he and Anthony and Sam Ehlinger have a great dynamic in that quarterback room. Continuing to develop within this offense. I think my biggest curiosity is, do Chris Ballard and Shane Steichen look at this as, is there someone of a backup quarterback stature that is more in line with the style of play of Anthony Richardson that would allow us to, if we go to a backup, maintain more similarities within the playbook and run primarily the same offense? Not going to be exactly the same offense because Anthony is so unique with his abilities, but is there a quarterback who has, who a little bit is more in line with Anthony's traits and characteristics that you would plug into this system? Not sure that there is. I'm not making an argument necessarily to do that. I haven't really, delved much into who was out there in the free agent market. I would love to see Gardner back. I certainly think that he has earned that opportunity. It would not surprise me either way. It wouldn't surprise me for Gardner to be re-signed. It also wouldn't surprise me if there is a team out there that looks at Gardner and says, hey, this guy gives us a chance to win. We want to bring him in to compete for the starting job.
How much difference, JJ, in your opinion, Larry's making a great point there. How much difference is that playbook when you go, and we saw it months ago, the great success that Gardner had after an injury to Anthony Richardson? And we were talking about this off air and in the office and everything. Is it because he doesn't run the same style of offense, so therefore they're changing the play calls that fit the quarterback's needs, but this defense and this defensive coordinator is still locked in on defending Anthony Richardson, who can run like the wind and has an arm to throw it out of the stadium?
I mean, I think probably in those games where Anthony exited, which would be Tennessee and Houston, there's probably an element of that, of you're preparing for Anthony. And I mean, the Houston game, the Colts, pretty much it felt like they already had it won by the time Anthony exited the game. But I think what Shane did such a good job of this year was, they're not going to run the same offense. Like Gardner he obviously does not have the running ability of Anthony Richardson. You could argue very few do. He also doesn't have the arm strength. But what are Gardner's strengths? Okay, he can get the ball out on time. The Colts just leaned into this RPO-heavy offense that they were already kind of going down that path with Anthony. But then it just became even more aggressive in terms of the RPOs with Gardner because that's what he did really well within that offense. So I totally get where Larra's coming from of like, do you want a quarterback who's maybe more in line with Anthony so you don't have to have such a huge shift and pivot if something happens? Having said that, Gardner and Shane Steichen have a great relationship to where Shane knows what to do with Gardner. So, Gardner's in. All right, this is the offense we're going to run. We can pivot easily to this in a way that you're not going to be that easy if it's Gardner, if it's the same quarterback skill set as Gardner, but it's a different quarterback, essentially, because you don't have those years of experience together. To me, the question is, does Gardner get an opportunity to start somewhere?
That's the question we're waiting for.
Because if he does,
then gone, man. You got to take that. If you're given that opportunity as a quarterback, you got to go, hey, here's the ball, here's the playbook, the offense is yours, gone.
There's not a quarterback in the NFL who's going to pass on an opportunity to start.
Does that happen? Does that happen, really?
No.
You don't think so? A bigger money offer than honestly, the Colts would to keep Gardner here, a bigger money offer for his skill set to come in. And I'm not talking about, how about half backup, half starter role if there is such a thing?
Yeah, I mean, you could go to a team that could draft a quarterback, kind of like Gardner did this year. Or you could go to a team where you're told, hey, we're not going to get a guy this year, but you're going to be our bridge guy.
Yeah.
To me, I wouldn't want a quarterback who would just come back to be a backup. I want that guy to be competitive. I want the mentality that Gardner Minshew brought to this Colts locker room of, I may not be the starter, but I'm going to still act like I am. Yeah. I'm going to prepare like I am, and I'm going to be ready. I don't want the guy who comes in and is like almost surprised when they have to start. Like that, you don't want that guy on your team because that guy's not going to be a very good influence in the locker room. He's not. That's not. You want the mentality of I want to start wherever I can go.
Quickly looking at free agent quarterbacks on the market, 2024: Kirk Cousins, Ryan Tannehill, Jacoby Brissett, Mitchell Trubisky, Tyrod Taylor, Marcus Mariota, Sam Darnold, Drew Lock, Baker Mayfield. Then we get to Gardner, Teddy Bridgewater, who is obviously already retired, and he's going to go coach his high school team. There was that great shot that you saw of him after their last game. But yeah, that's kind of what you're looking at on the open market right now. So of course, a couple of those guys, it'd be interesting to see what Kirk Cousins does. Not that necessarily that would be a situation here, but kind of intriguing to see. Does he go back to the Vikings, And could you also have a situation where if Gardner walks, do you just elevate Sam Ehlinger to be back up?
Another great question. That's now a third, fourth year around.
Spent a draft pick on him for a reason.
Right.
Is this the time that he develops into that guy? Hey, if something goes down with our number one, we got Sam there. I think it's a perfect year for that. So much to be told in this thing because, damned if you do, damned if you don't. You want to let the young guy develop in some instances, but then you got the veteran there that is going to be able to bring the ball down the field. Okay, here we go. We've talked about the backup quarterback, about Anthony Richardson. We talked about Michael Pittman. Defensively speaking, are they adding to always looking for help? Is it in the back end? Or is it on the defensive line, or is it the secondary?
I think that's kind of the question of where do those resources go? The Colts spent money to get Samson Ebukam here last year. You're probably going to, if you want to retain Grover Stewart, you're going to have to spend there as well. I'm kind of talking about outside of if the Colts decide to retain Grove and Kenny, Julian, kind of where else do the resources go on that side of the ball? Is it defensive line? Do you fortify that group with another pass rusher, another defensive tackle, or do you look at corner where the Colts intentionally went young but said, we want to develop the young guys. We want Jalen Jones to get playing time. We want Juju Brents to get playing time. We want Dallas Flowers to get playing time, which they did last year to different, varying extents. And do you then say, okay, maybe we need to go get a veteran corner in there. Maybe we need to go get a veteran safety in there where you got Nick Cross getting playing time. You got Rodney Thomas getting playing time as well. That part of it's interesting. Like the Colts have the flexibility like we're talking about with Anthony Richardson. It extends to defense where you can have more flexibility to go spend resources on that side of the ball. Does that extend to we're going to pour more into the D-line, which we know Chris Ballard is you win up front type of guy, or is it kind of like the Colts did 2 years ago where they went and they got Stephon Gilmore and spent some resources on that in the offseason? Do you go look that way? I don't know what the answer is, but that's going to kind of be a really interesting thing to follow this offseason is where do those cap dollars and those draft picks go?
To me, at some point, you've got to invest, or not even invest because you've made the investment, but you almost have to gamble on the guys that you drafted. You've got to go all in with Quiddy and Dio and those guys, and now it's like, this is the time. This is where those guys...
See, that's funny, because I thought you were going to say Juju and Jalen.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah.
So you could go both ways with it.
Right, you really could. I'm just thinking in terms of typically the necessary development that you have, especially as a pass rusher, that usually takes a couple of years to transition and kind of translate from the college game, learning a new system in the NFL, learning that new scheme, and then having the type of success and impact that you do in the NFL. So to me, I think that this is you hedge your bets and you go all in with that Dio, Quiddy, kind of investment there, plus what you've done with Samson, the other guys who you have. I think that this is where those guys and, whatever we see transpire, of course, with that defensive front and with that group, I think it will be heavily dependent on the effectiveness and the development of those two guys to me.
I kind of feel like cornerback isn't as big of a need, though, as some people may think. Like I every mock draft I see, Colts need a cornerback. Colts need a cornerback. I don't know if it's like that red line of a need. I know everyone's, you can be scarred from what C.J. Stroud did to the Colts. Absolutely. But think about the flashes you saw from Juju Brents, where if he can stay healthy, and he said after the season, his number one goal this offseason is figuring out how to be healthy and how to stay healthy for a full season. You saw some good things out of Jalen Jones. Can you win with those guys? Can you, Dallas Flowers was showing some good things when he had the Achilles injury in week 4. Could you go into the season without being like, we need to get way over our skis at cornerback, take a guy in the first round, get the top of the market free agent, and say we're actually going to be pretty good at that position.
It's, to me, it all hinges on Kenny and what you do with his contract situation.
Well, yeah, because you got to be good in the slot, especially in a division that has the Houston Texans now. Mm-hmm. You got to have three corners on the field. You got to be a nickel quite a bit, and that's what Gus Bradley likes to play. And I mean, Kenny's also so important to the run defense. The way that he can play as like kind of that third linebacker on the field, in addition to playing coverage. But yeah, I mean, you need to make sure that you got that locked down, whether it's Kenny, someone else, before you start thinking about, do we need to lock down the outsides?
Right, and he said it a few years ago. I don't remember the exact year, but it was something along the lines of, hey, they're telling me it's free agency season. I'm signing free agents. They're in our locker room.
Right.
Here. That mentality of signing within. Okay, scenario question. Larra, I'm going to start with you. A big splash. Does it need to happen this year with this offense? And here's your three categories, if you will. Big splash. Wide receiver, tight end. Draft, trade, free agency. If that happens and it's a splash, you're spending 15 on a wide receiver or a tight end. You're making a trade for a veteran wide receiver or a tight end. I'm saying, I know I'm kind of pigeonholing those two positions, but if nothing happens along those lines, is it a surprise? If nothing happens in that department,
yes. I think if nothing happens, yes, because I think actually two of those three to me are pretty likely.
Do tell.
I think that you can make a splash by re-signing Michael Pittman, and I also think you can make a splash in the draft and use 15 on an offensive playmaker.
And when you say playmaker, let's just get this right. Either a wide receiver,
right?
Either a tight end,
right?
Because you have running backs settled.
Running backs are settled.
Although, can you bring back Zach Moss?
Well, I'm more saying I have that on the rundown.
Yeah, the top running back.
Yeah.
Do you have that settled? That's my question.
Well, it's you have your top running back.
You have
paid
your top
Jonathan
running back.
Taylor.
No question.
So you're probably not going to use 15
right,
on a run.
Right.
That's more what I'm getting at.
Okay.
Sure.
Like the most valuable things you have in this offseason are pick 15 and the cap space, the effective cap space you have available. How much of those big time assets go toward a wide receiver or a tight end? And I threw tight end in there because we're talking about pass catchers here.
Sure.
Like this isn't just a wide receiver, just a tight end. It's a pass catcher.
Right.
To whether it's a complement to Michael Pittman, whether it's a replacement to Michael Pittman, whether it's Michael Pittman and then someone else. The one thing I will say is every draft podcast I've listened to has talked about how deep a year this is for wide receivers. This is one of those years where and we had Trevor Sikkema on last week, where he was talking about, you kind of have those top three guys who are probably out of range for the Colts just based on, reading tea leaves, which would be Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors, and Rome Odunze from Washington. But then after that, you have a lot of guys who are talented who you could potentially say, we don't love any of these guys at 15, but we really like this guy in the second round, like the Colts did with Michael Pittman Jr. a couple years ago. Maybe that's the route you go.
And I have heard from just various scouts over, multiple seasons that some have indicated that, in that top 10, it's a pretty significant, that stature of the talent you're getting within the top 10, that is one big block of talent. Then basically from kind of that next tier, say 11 to 35, it's pretty, it can be, depending on the year, pretty comparable. So you could get someone high in that second round, or it's not going to be a drastic difference, say, between 15 and 35 in terms of the caliber of talent that you're able to acquire at that position.
The one thing here for Colts fans to maybe root for, how about quarterback stock rising in the draft? Like there are two, Caleb Williams and Drake May seem to be kind of the, they'll go top three.
But Daniels is
Jaden Daniels right there, and now there's this buzz about J.J. McCarthy being a top 12, 15 pick. The more quarterbacks that go off the board ahead of the Colts, the better, because then you might be looking at, we're sitting at 15, but we have this guy top 10 on our board, but we can still get him at 15. It doesn't matter what position he plays at that point. If you have say it's a corner or, whoever, and he's available at 15, if you're like, but we need to get a weapon for Anthony Richardson, but this guy's a top 10 quarterback.
Right.
We got to go take him.
But
this
I'm
guy's
saying-
a top 10 D lineman. We got to go take him.
If you see that draft board, it kind of falls out like that, and all of a sudden 10, 11, 12 is in there, and you're Chris Ballard, and you're in the back there, and you're saying, our guy's going to be there. Why don't I just, if I can notch up 2 slots, 3 slots, I'll give him a little bit out of the cabinet, but I'll keep my first rounder on this one. We'll move up. They get that. And, Bob's your uncle. Everything's good. Obviously, that's in a perfect scenario, but there's so many of them out there. That's what I wanted to get to is like we're surprised between the draft, between trades, and between free agency if a wide receiver isn't in this building is what I'm coming to the consensus. And, if that doesn't happen and we don't run the football franchise, but, obviously following along on that, it looks like that's going to happen. We don't know if it's going to be, a veteran or they will spend a 15 on a guy that becomes available, like you said.
It was the Chris Ballard quote from January, like, it's like gas. If gas is $4 a gallon, you got to have it in your car.
Yeah.
The
Gotta
wide
pay it.
receiver, you got to have a wide receiver. You got to have wide receivers on your team.
Love it. We've talked about the Olympics today.
We've really.
We've talked about the NFL draft.
We're on the
talked about
gamut.
Major League Baseball. I haven't talked about food yet. Going to get to the NBA All-Star Weekend, but I just kind of want to wrap up a little bit with this Colts off-season talk because next week it's for real down at the Combine. How much does free agency tell us about the draft? Obviously, it's an easy question. Say, we sign this guy, then we don't need this guy in the draft. Not the case, though. We need depth. These NFL franchises need depth. That's even an offensive line and in the wide receiver room included.
I think usually when you look at the first 3 rounds, you can say, okay, this team did this in free agency, so there's no usually those first 3 rounds, you're looking for contributors right off the bat. Like whether it's, a guy who's going to start for you probably in the first round, compete to start in the second round, compete to start in the third round, or be a contributor in the third round. You don't want it, like last year, for instance, the Colts signed Isaiah McKenzie. He was the only wide receiver move they made. That did not preclude them from drafting Josh Downs, and then having Josh Downs wind up competing and wind up taking in most of those snaps in the slot. That's usually kind of what I mean by this is like you can sort of follow that path. Whereas you sign last year Samson Ebukam to that contract, you've already invested quite a bit in Kwity Paye and Dayo Odangbo through the draft, and maybe we don't need a D end in the first couple rounds. Now, having said that, you're always going to say, if there's a guy who's just sticking out on your board, there are very few players in the NFL who are going to preclude you from drafting that guy. Like, if you're the Los Angeles Rams 5 years ago, you're probably not taking a 3-tech defensive tackle in the first round because you have Aaron Donald.
Right.
But if you're the Los Angeles Rams now, okay, yeah, maybe we'll take a D tackle because we think that guy could be Aaron Donald's replacement.
Right, in a couple of years.
I'm more just saying, like, it's easy to see with quarterbacks, right? Like, the Chiefs are not taking a quarterback in the first round. The Ravens are not taking a quarterback in the first round. But there are teams that, you look at how contracts are structured and the moves that you make in free agency, those usually give you a bit of a roadmap of what teams might be thinking about when it comes to April.
Hey, Larra, a position close to your heart, because I know you love those guys in that room, but the tight end position. And what's going to happen with these? There is a lot, and I mean a lot of talent in that room right now. And that, we can go over those names, but I'm telling you, we didn't get Woods last year. Now he's coming back this year with that big talent, that big target. We don't know what's going on with Ogletree. Got a feeling, though. I'm just going to leave that one alone. But then you've got the Will Mallory's coming on here. Obviously, the veteran, what we're talking about. Between Mo Alley-Cox, between Kyle and Granson, the veterans, and, what we're seeing of the young guys coming out, specifically Woods, if he's back healthy. Do they need to make a splash? There's great tight ends over this upcoming NFL draft as well.
Well, I'm really intrigued by what Tom Manning will do with the second year with that group. I thought last year his impact on the tight ends was evident in what he was able to do with that group and some of the development you saw. And then also just Shane's implementation of more of those guys as well, utilization of them more so in the passing game. I thought Mo had a huge year developing, especially as a blocker. And then it was fun to see, Kylan used in a couple of different ways. You saw some kind of trick play scenarios. You saw how they got kind of creative in the ways you could utilize him more so. It's like you don't have that one dominant guy. You've got a lot of good guys who are very well complements to one another. Now it's almost time that somebody kind of has to step in and take over and be the go-to guy, be that end zone threat, that you did see flashes of Jelani in his rookie season. If it's kind of like, you talked about with Juju, this big thing is got to learn how to stay healthy.
Right.
That's what Jelani has to do. And, we've seen him around the building, putting in a ton of work, all of those things. Now it's kind of time to prove it. And I think that this off-season period, as guys get back in the building later in the spring and all of that, will be really indicative of what you have within that group and if you need to fortify that group in some way.
Wow. Will Mallory, just a few plays in the back of my head from last season that I was like, and he's just a quiet young man, a very personable guy, obviously, but just showed up, had some huge plays, and I'm thinking, Colts have a good problem in that tight end room right now, in my opinion. And the funny thing is, there's an all-end do-all guy who does everything tight end that'll remain nameless. That's in the upcoming draft. It's like with all that talent they have right now, JJ. Could you see something like that? Could you see if their guy showed up at 15, they said, hey, the best player available or whatever it is, but could Ballard add another tight end to this room?
But it's like what Larra was just talking about, that all those guys, they've shown flashes, right? We've seen Granson, Mallory, Mo, Jelani in 2022. We've seen all those guys flash. We haven't seen it consistently. And you look at the 4 teams, we talked about this on a previous pod, but the 4 teams that were in the conference championships, they all had kind of that guy at tight end: Mark Andrews, Sam Laporta, Travis Kelce, George Kittle. Those are but those guys were all taken in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th rounds, which is what the Colts have done. The Colts have tried to follow that, where tight end development usually takes a couple of years. It's rare to see a Sam Laporta come in and have the season he had. Usually it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years into a guy's career.
Think back to Jack Doyle, undrafted guy. Yeah. You signed off the Titans practice squad, and look what he became, I mean,
so you need to give tight ends time to develop, but it also has kind of been shown that you don't need to get that guy in the first round. There are guys who, TJ Hawkinson's a pretty good example of someone who was taken in the first round, has been successful, but it also took him 2, 3, 4 years to really reach the level that he's at now as one of the best tight ends in the NFL. Yeah. So you need to give him time, and sometimes you can find those guys like in the 5th round, like where George Kittle was drafted.
Right. Larra, in this whole thing, any positions I haven't talked about, we haven't talked about here, that you might be surprised at if a higher draft pick comes from a 2nd, 3rd, 4th, but it's a loaded question because we don't know what's going on with free agency.
Yeah.
So, it's far down the road, but
So this is why you brought up Zach Moss, and I wanted to throw it back to Zach Moss, is probably not in the 1st round, but what if you're looking in the 2nd round and there's a guy who's an explosive playmaker, like, not saying this guy's available. I haven't looked at literally any running back except I know Frank Gore's kid is in the NFL draft this year. That's all I know. What if you looked at it and you were like, this guy's Jahmyr Gibbs, and we're sitting here in the 2nd round. Wouldn't you think about taking him? It's not like he's going to impinge on Jonathan Taylor's productivity, and maybe he takes a couple touches away. Maybe that's not a bad thing.
Bad thing, right?
What if there's like that type of a weapon? I mean, 2018 Nyheim Hines, like that type of guy, where it's a different skill set than the running back you already have in, but a guy who you can envision being a playmaking weapon within your offense. That, I think, is something that is absolutely a thing the Colts would consider.
Playmakers always come this way.
So just because the Colts don't use a first-round pick on a running back doesn't necessarily mean that they won't use a day 2 pick or a high day 3 pick on a running back.
I hope I don't get in trouble for going over this. What are we talking about with our special teams department right now, specifically when we're talking about Rigoberto?
Yeah, he's a free agent. So that's another one of those, do you re-sign your own type of situation, and he has spent his entire career here, obviously coming back off the injury last year, and you saw him just get progressively stronger.
He got a lot better
over the course of the year with that Achilles tear that he had.
Cancer survivor?
Yeah. So Matt Gay, you have locked up. Luke Rhodes, I think, is pretty set. But it's really just kind of what's the situation with Rigo and, what price can you get him back on?
Right.
And the other, the thing that is the most boring thing to talk about every offseason, but is one of the most important, is how do you fill out your special teams depth chart? Where does that come from? Does it come from, a bunch of draft picks? Does it come from undrafted free agents? Does it come from veteran free agents? That's something that, again, no one really cares to talk about. In terms of we're talking about should the Colts get Michael Pittman on the tag or whatever, and I'm like, yeah, but what about what about that 5th guy on special teams?
Right.
But that has been an important thing that the Colts have had over the years, and is something else that as you go through the draft, there's kind of that point in the draft where guys go from this guy's going to be a contributor on offense or defense to this guy's going to be a special teams guy. And even like you hear like Chris Ballard talk about Daniel Scott, the 5th round safety who tore his ACL in the offseason. You hear him talk about Daniel Scott, like, that guy was going to be a special teams contributor, but he could have played a little on defense. Like, there's always that one guy who's like the front office and the scouting staff love is like, this guy's a core special teamer from the day he walks on the field. But that's not something that you're asking a lot of questions about at this point in the offseason.
For sure. So many answers, rather, that are going to be, we're going to have so many answers, rather, after talking to, these young men that are coming out in the upcoming draft, because next week is at the NFL Combine and what we're going to get there. I'm going to ask you two, and then I'm going to venture off of football. One last question. What do you personally want to accomplish at this year's NFL Combine?
I want to pick the brains of some other, and I love doing this every year, but you pick the brains of other beat writers who are there. Guys I know, women I know who cover certain teams around the league. Just, hey, what is this? What are you thinking? Like, you kind of get information that way to kind of set you up for whatever may come a couple weeks down the road.
Sure.
Is this team going to keep this guy? What does your team think about this player? Could this player be available in a trade? Just like stuff like that. You hear a lot of that stuff. I'll be, probably making some poor late night decisions going out with my friends at the Combine. Nothing too crazy, but like last year I saw Von Miller at like 1 a.m. at the JW Marriott bar.
High velocity.
Yeah, not High Velocity.
Oh,
the
no?
classier bar in the JW.
I like the high velocity.
I love High Velocity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the time.
Other than High Velocity and JW,
right.
you're going to be hustling all week. What do we got?
Yeah, I am looking forward to sitting down with some of the national media and just getting their perspectives on the job that Shane did this last year, what they're looking forward to from him going into a second season, maybe their questions surrounding Anthony Richardson and, what they're wanting to see from him as guys come back in the building when you get into that critical period of, OTAs and mini camp and, the outlook for him. And then I think overall too, what's the perspective on the AFC South going into 2024? Right? Like, what a wild division with where Houston
no quarterbacks
finished,
1 year, and then the next year.
Worst division in the league 1 year.
The way Houston went into the playoffs, the way Jacksonville went, out of the playoffs, what happens in Tennessee, so many things there. New head coach, what are they doing with their quarterback situation? Tannehill's on the market. Are they, rolling with Will Levis from here on out? So I think that those are all intriguing things too, because we are also looking intrinsically here, right? And internally at what's happening, but it's also, man, how do we stack up against the rest of the division? And then, what's the rest of the AFC look like? Obviously, the Chiefs are on this dynasty run right now. How is everyone else positioning themselves to challenge?
That'll be a great day. Hey, I'm going to be pulling as many people, and I'm going to be bothering you two down there, and we're going to be pulling people, trying to get them on podcasts. That's the funnest part I like about it. That, and I will have one of those 4 days that I'm down there, a Shapiro's Deli visit.
Okay.
Oh, I love
Good
that.
For you.
Down there, and I might have to grab you guys one.
Yes.
I will.
please.
If we don't talk.
I've never had Shapiro's.
Oh, it's wonderful.
You're missing
Absolutely
out.
Never had it.
wonderful.
Let's change that next
a
week.
A staple, as far as I'm concerned, as far as delis in Indianapolis, the best is Shapiro. Speaking of the best, we had an NBA All-Star weekend recently. I'm going to start with you. You went, if memory serves, on Saturday night to All-Star Saturday night at Lucas Oil Stadium.
I did.
Tell me about it.
The court was really cool.
Yeah.
Oh, it looked amazing.
So I was up.
and-
I was up in the 500 level. The tickets, the tickets were given to me. So I'm not going to be like, so high up. It was great. The 3-point contest was awesome. The skills competition was better than I thought, but the Steph versus Sabrina,
Yeah, that was fun.
that was the best one.
Yeah, that was fun.
And I mean, Sabrina Ionescu put up a score that would have tied Damian Lillard to win the actual 3-point contest.
Right.
It just so happened that Steph Curry, he's and like what that like drama of like Steph misses a couple, then he gets on a hot streak, and then he misses one, and then he hits one from the lemon lime cola range or whatever it is. And then like that was fun. The dunk contest was super lame.
It was. That was bad. And the 200 points that they scored and stuff, and absolutely no defense. And then,
I didn't watch
heard
a
you talking about Karl Anthony Towns scoring 50 points in an All-Star game and not getting the MVP and stuff like
But
that.
how exciting was Tyrese Halliburton when he was just
great.
draining him?
Yeah.
He scored like 15
I watched
points
none
in
of
like
the
2
game
minutes.
last night, so that was just
And
me.
when they won the team competition, and the night that you went,
that was fun.
That was awesome because they
tweeted-
guaranteed it.
I tweeted during the skills competition that I didn't expect to be hooting and hollering during the team skills competition. That was fun.
Hey, we got blanketed by snow and everybody was coming in, but then, by Sunday it was 50 degrees out, so
By the way,
typical Indiana weather, but,
not many other cities put on big events like the city of Indianapolis.
Let's go.
And as well as the city of Indianapolis does. This was surprising to me. We built in probably 30 minutes of extra time for an Uber to the stadium on Saturday. And we got right down there. We got dropped off a block from the stadium, walked in. Oh, that was great.
That was easy.
That was incredible.
Perfect. That's the way they do it.
That
Same
was
thing with
well
Super
done.
Bowl.
Yeah.
All right, Colts, like I said, next week at the Combine, we're going to be down there. Colts, we're going to have a bunch of people covering stuff, that little mini radio row there they do, which is a lot of fun seeing familiar faces. We're coming at you next week from down there. The official Colts podcast today brought to you by our friend Kevin Connor, who is behind the camera today. We want to wish him a thank you very much. Guys, I can't wait to find out about that because this isn't very the low doldrums of the NFL season, though we're calling it that, because it is so, once you get into Lucas Oil Stadium next week and on that Monday morning walking into that thing, it's on. It's like you're counting down days till Westfield, till training camp starts. So that's what I'm excited about. So anyway, guys, I know we're going to be busy. I appreciate the time today. Kevin, thank you for your help. Thanks for watching. Colts.com has all of the information that you need on this upcoming Combine, as well as the dates that you need, free agency and such. Obviously, we're talking about the Colts players and watching the latest with Michael Pittman Jr. included in that group. So I'm excited, guys. I appreciate you sitting down and talking, and I will bring you a Shapiro's deli sandwich. I don't know what day I'm going down, but it's going to happen. Anything before we close out here?
No, I just no cheese on mine.
No cheese on the Stankevitz deli sandwich for Larra Overton, for JJ Stankevitz. This is the official Colts podcast, and again, find all the info you need on Colts.com and, of course, the Colts audio network. You can find what you need on Colts.com as usual. Thanks for watching. We'll talk to you next week from downtown at the Combine.